The most dangerous aircraft in the sky may not be the one carrying the most missiles. It may not even be the one that fires the first shot. In fact, the most important aircraft in America's next generation of air warfare could spend much of its time doing something that sounds surprisingly ordinary: giving orders. Orders to aircraft that don't have pilots, orders to machines that could fly directly into danger, orders to autonomous systems searching for enemy radars, confusing air defenses, gathering intelligence, or even carrying weapons. And somewhere behind all of them, there could be one human pilot, sitting inside the F-47. That sounds strange because we've spent decades thinking of fighter jets as individual weapons. The F-16 fights, the F-15 fights, the F-22 fights. But what if the next generation fighter isn't designed to fight alone? What if its greatest advantage isn't what's inside its weapons bay, but everything it can control around it? That's where the F-47 becomes truly fascinating. Because beneath the secrecy surrounding America's newest air superiority aircraft is a radical idea. The F-47 may not be the weapon that wins the battle. It may be the machine that tells every other weapon where to go, and that could represent one of the biggest changes in military aviation since the invention of the jet fighter. For almost a century, the basic idea of a fighter aircraft was surprisingly simple: find the enemy, get into position, shoot, survive. The technology became more advanced, but the fundamental concept remained the same. A pilot sat inside an aircraft, and that aircraft was the weapon. But the battlefield of the future is becoming much more complicated. Enemy radar systems are becoming harder to penetrate, missiles can reach farther, and artificial intelligence is changing how quickly information can be processed. So the question facing the U.S. Air Force isn't simply, how do we build a better fighter? It's, what if the fighter doesn't have to do everything itself? That is where the F-47 enters the story. The aircraft is part of America's Next Generation Air Dominance Program, or NGAD. And NGAD isn't simply about creating one aircraft. It's about creating an entire family of systems that can work together. Think of the F-47 as the center of that system. Its greatest advantage may not be flying faster than everything else. It may be knowing what's happening before everyone else. Imagine an F-47 operating deep inside contested airspace. Instead of searching for every threat itself, autonomous aircraft could move ahead. One might search for enemy radar. Another could act as a decoy. Another might carry additional weapons. The pilot doesn't need to physically fly each one. The F-47 becomes the center of the operation, the brain. And suddenly, the definition of a fighter aircraft begins to change. For decades, military aviation followed a simple equation: one aircraft equals one combat platform. The future could look very different. One pilot, multiple autonomous aircraft, a massive network of sensors, and information flowing between them. The pilot isn't necessarily fighting alone anymore. The pilot is commanding a team, and that creates a nightmare for the enemy. Imagine detecting an F-47. You think you've found the target, but then you realize the aircraft you've detected isn't necessarily the aircraft that's going to attack you. Maybe the real threat is a drone hundreds of miles away. Maybe another aircraft is collecting intelligence. Maybe something else is acting as a decoy. And maybe the F-47 itself is somewhere else entirely. The battlefield becomes a puzzle, and the enemy doesn't know which piece is the most dangerous. That's the real advantage of this concept. The F-47 doesn't have to win every fight by itself. It can potentially force the enemy to fight an entire network. Destroy one drone, the rest continue. Destroy a decoy, you may have just wasted a missile on something that was never the real target. The goal is no longer simply to protect one aircraft. The goal is to keep the entire system functioning, and that could completely change how air superiority is achieved. But there's another reason the F-47 is so fascinating: distance. Future conflicts, particularly across the Indo-Pacific, could involve enormous operating areas. In a traditional dogfight, maneuverability matters. But if your opponent is hundreds of miles away, you may never even see them. The battle could be decided by who detects the other first, who understands the situation faster, and who can attack before the opponent even realizes they're under threat. That means information becomes a weapon, and the F-47 could be built around that reality. The most important thing the pilot sees might not be outside the cockpit. It might be the information displayed inside it. Enemy aircraft, missile threats, radar emissions, friendly forces, autonomous aircraft, targets, threats, opportunities. The pilot becomes less like a traditional fighter pilot and more like the commander of a flying command center. But this raises an even bigger question. What happens when artificial intelligence becomes faster at processing information than humans? A human pilot might make the final decision, but machines could help identify threats, analyze data, and coordinate multiple systems almost instantly. The human remains in control. But the human is no longer expected to do everything manually. It's a partnership, and that partnership could give the F-47 an advantage that has nothing to do with raw speed. Reaction time. Because in modern warfare, sometimes the first side to understand the situation is already halfway to winning. This is why calling the F-47 simply a fighter jet might actually undersell what it's supposed to become. It's a fighter. Yes, but potentially it's also a sensor, a communications node, a weapons coordinator, a drone commander, and a bridge between humans and autonomous machines. That's why the F-47 could represent a much bigger change than simply replacing the F-22. The F-22 was designed to dominate the sky. The F-47 may be designed to dominate the entire battle space. That's a very different ambition. But there's a catch. The more complicated the system becomes, the more things can go wrong. The aircraft needs advanced engines, stealth, sensors, secure communications, sophisticated software, artificial intelligence, and autonomous aircraft that can all operate together. Every component has to work, and more importantly, they all have to work together. Because the F-47's greatest strength could also become its greatest weakness. If the network fails, the aircraft could lose some of its biggest advantages. If communications are disrupted, autonomy becomes even more important. If sensors are deceived, the entire picture could become unreliable. And if the software can't keep up with the chaos of war, the most advanced aircraft in the world could suddenly become very confused. That is the gamble behind this new generation of warfare. But perhaps that's exactly why the F-47 is so important. It isn't simply trying to build a better fighter. It's trying to redefine what a fighter is. The aircraft may still have wings, it may still carry weapons, and yes, there will still be a pilot sitting inside. But the real weapon could be everything connected to it. The drones, the sensors, the data, the artificial intelligence, the network. And if this vision succeeds, the F-47 may eventually be remembered not simply as the fighter that replaced the F-22, but as the aircraft that made the traditional definition of a fighter obsolete. Because the next great air battle may not be decided by the aircraft with the best pilot, or even the aircraft with the fastest engine. It could be decided by the side that can connect the most machines, process the most information, and make the right decision before the enemy even realizes the battle has begun. And that is why the F-47 may not really be a fighter at all. It may be something much bigger. A pilot in the sky, commanding an entire battlefield. And if that future arrives, the F-47 won't just change how America fights. It could change what we mean when we say fighter aircraft. Because the fighter of tomorrow may not fight alone. It may never have to. This version is substantially shorter than the previous draft and removes the repeated explanations rather than merely changing the wording.